Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Mini Trauma Recovery Talks. And I start every session out, almost every session, and I say, this is a very special podcast. Well, I start to realize the reason that I say that is because each one of these topics are very, very, very special. Because as we are walking through and navigating this whole trauma recovery, right? What does it look like on the other side of trauma? Trauma being a very heavy subject, and oftentimes we're swallowing the trauma. We're swallowing the fact, we're denying it. So we're walking around in denial. And because trauma is so progressive, all of a sudden something happens one day and it triggers you, and now you're all out of what you think is character. But guess what? I'm here to challenge you on that. Do you really know what is in character for you? And let me explain what I mean by that. When we've hit trauma after trauma after trauma, or even maybe an acute case of trauma, part of us is no longer intact. So we're not walking through life making decisions off of 100% of us. So do you really know what's in character for you? I'm going to challenge you on that. See, how does life work post-trauma? And how do I know so well? Because I'm on the other side. I am walking through, the recovery side of trauma. And on the side of recovery, there's still some things that we must do in order to keep us from relapsing. And it's called relapse prevention, right? When you're on this cycle of addiction, whether it is trauma, whether it is addiction to a substance like alcohol or drugs, or no matter what your cycle of addiction is. And yes, trauma is on that spectrum, that cycle of addiction, right? And in order to come off of that, we must go into recovery. And then when you're in recovery, what's on the other side? On the other side is when you work through your trauma, life begins to make sense. What do I mean? You start making decisions based off of 100% of yourself versus a shattered, maybe 60% of yourself, right? And so the kaleidoscope, we talked about what your life looks like walking through trauma. It's like a kaleidoscope. And how do I know? Because this has been my story. And how do I verify or quantify this information? Because many, many people that have gone through trauma reach out and we talk about it. We go through, we figure out what is on the other side of this trauma. How do I live a fulfilled life where I'm not always on that panic button, right? Whole different experience, right? The kaleidoscope, it starts to clear up. Those fragmented pieces start to make sense. You start to understand and walk in the fact that you matter. Trauma distorts what you see of yourself. So now on the other side, you come to the understanding that you matter. Let's sit with that for a minute. Have you even thought about that? You start to understand that you deserve the very best, and you now stop settling. You know what it is that you want, and you know clearly what it is that you don't want. And you understand what it means when people say a closed mouth does not get fed. So therefore, you begin to ask for what you want, and guess what? You receive it. You start to let go and you start to allow God to be God in your life. You understand and you allow yourself to receive. That's another biggie. When you've gone through trauma, it's hard to allow people to give to you. It's a place of, I don't know if you feel less than or what it is. I haven't quite put my finger on what that feeling is, though I am working on it. Your heart opens up and it beats a little different. The fear disappears because you're no longer in panic mode 24/7. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to face situations or bouts of fear. You will, but you will have better tools in your toolkit in order to help you to navigate what that looks like, in order to help navigate your outcome, in order to help navigate your experience, right? The fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, those trauma responses disappear. There was a situation where I used to work in a position, where entrepreneur position, of court courier, right? So I would process documents for attorneys and take them down and process them at the courts. And there was a situation where I had a conflict with someone. And as I walked into the building, all of a sudden, I felt that trauma response. And at that time, I did not know, I did not have the training that I have now, or the experience that I have now in this trauma arena. But I was so, like, I was paralyzed in that moment. I saw the person. They were no immediate threat to me. However, my body responded. And first it was fear. Then it was, how do I figure out how to navigate myself out of here? It was flight. And then it was fight mode, because I got angry. I got angry because I didn't understand what was happening to me. Why does this happen to me? Where did these triggers come from? Right. But on the other side of that, now I understand it. So when that situation arises where I see that conflict coming, I no longer go into those trauma responses. I actually sit with it, decide what is actually the reality of the situation, and I figure out what's the best outcome. Huge difference than when you are in the midst or the thralls of that trauma response. You also you also you understand now how your body functions and how your body handles trauma. So now you go into your self-care. We did a 6-part episode on PTSD in the military versus civilian complex PTSD, and my guest, Mr. Rufus Carpenter, was on, and he talked about the self-care portion. When I told him what it takes for me to get up and get ready every day, right? I need almost a 2.5, 3 hour window, because I have to do my exercise, have to drink my water, make sure I eat breakfast, make sure I do my meditation and my prayer, make sure I do my praise. And he said, "Ooh, that's a lot." But this is what I say to that. And he also said in that episode, he said, "I don't know if I can really commit to that. That's a lot." What I say is that it's a lot to deal with trauma and trauma responses, and your trauma triggers always being ever present. That to me is a lot. So self-care and putting together your own individual self-care plan. Now, we put the resources together for you. However, there's your own individual plan. Your fingerprint is is individual, right? And that's what your self-care plan is. You know what resonates with you, you know what doesn't work. But I say, for me, I'll try it. I never knew that I liked slow stretching, right? I thought I was always that aggressive girl that wanted to do aggressive. I love racquetball, because you could hit that ball hard and get rid of some of that stress. I love being on the bike, where you're going at your pace, or on the treadmill where you're almost at a running pace. I never knew how valuable a stretch, a yoga stretch, would be, how valuable that would be, how much that would help me to clear my mind. And by the way, you're still getting a full body workout if you're engaging every part of you, right? You begin to smile again. You let go of toxic people, places, and things. You sleep peacefully. Oh, that's another one for me. I had not had a great night's sleep. My goodness. And I can't even remember. I remember waking up as a little girl, not being able to sleep through the night, not knowing what was going on with me. Yes, we talk about it. I talk about it in my books. I talk about it in some of the podcast episodes. My trauma began in the womb. When you come from domestic violence, and your body is, as a baby, you are forming in your mom's womb, and you're in a toxic environment, your body, your brain does not have the opportunity to come together like everybody else. It doesn't have the opportunity to come together correctly. So you have all these stress responses infused in you while you are being developed. So once I learned that, once I understood that, now life started to make sense. Why I couldn't sleep at night, why I had a nervous reaction, anxiety reaction, pretty much most of my life. I understood why life wasn't working for me, right? And I was able to formulate a plan to help me be and do better. So sleep became, oh my goodness, with the resources, My goodness, I could sleep through the night, getting a peaceful night's rest. You'll function better the next day. Life starts to make sense. The sun comes out again, right? My goodness, a peaceful night's sleep. You wake up in the morning refreshed. You walk into gratitude, or you walk in gratitude, understanding that your pain has now turned into purpose, that you're no longer in that state of constant fear, constant anxiety. You can now smile again. You can walk easy. And my prayer for everyone under the sound of my voice is that you're able to, first of all, come into awareness that trauma was not your fault. However, recovery, that is our responsibility. And I'll tell you, life makes sense once you are walking in recovery. Now, there is, again, like I said, relapse prevention. So you have to put that plan into place. But I tell you, life is so much better walking in recovery than it is walking in trauma and not understanding that that's what happened to you. So I hope this was helpful. I gave us some resources, or we have resources on the website at oasiswellnessctrs.com that can help you plug in to where you can best, where it can best help you, where it's best suited for you. All righty. Bye for now. And I hope this was helpful. I'll talk with you soon. It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you are collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.